2 minutes, and we'll get going. Steve? Okay, everybody, and those who are listening at home on YouTube, we're back in open session. We had some significant discussion between the City of Virginia and Essentia Health, and we're looking for further discussion and comments and potentially a motion in the public meeting with respect to our efforts moving forward. Does any counselor have a motion that they would like to make? Counselor Bearable?
Okay, with the significant discussion we have, I'm going to make a motion that we authorize our administrative team along with our city attorney to contact and work with the Essentia Health legal team to put together a resolution of information that will include all costs that Essentia Health has put into this facility since the affiliation agreement started, and come back, and with that information that we propose a sale of the Hospital to Essentia as the owner for the sum of $1.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor by Councilor Bearable. Is there support for that motion? Is there support for that motion? Is there support for that motion? Hearing none, supported by Councilor Friedlieb. Is there any further discussion? Councilor Friedlieb.
I don't know if we're at that point yet to determine that that's the exact cost of Essentia. I think I'd like to be able to further review and have them further review all of that information that's going to be provided with regard to the investments that have already been made to determine, in fact, whether or not a dollar is legitimized for conveying that property to Essentia. I'm not saying that I'm not of the mind that that's potentially the case at this point in time from what I've heard, but I think that there needs to be more eyes on it and maybe some more internal discussion to move forward with that.
So if my understanding is, Councilor Friedlieb, the issue we have is the motion as it stands without the codicil of the $1.
Correct.
Thank you. Further discussion, Councilor Johnson.
That was going to be my point too. I'm fine with everything up to adding the dollar value at the end. I would prefer to there not be a dollar value assessed at this time.
All right, thank you. Councilor Bearable, did you want to take another look at your motion?
Yeah, so what we're saying here is that we would have a separate, after the initial resolution would be agreed upon between the two parties. If I remove that $1, that would be a separate agreement, is that what I'm hearing?
No, I think what would be inclusive in your motion would be the agreement that would come with both parties upon a recommendation, whether it's $1 or not.
Okay, so if I take that dollar out at this point, they could come up with a mutually agreeable
They could.
figure between the two parties?
That is correct,
I
Councilor
will
Bearable.
remove that last stipulation and modify that with a mutually agreeable price for the transfer of the hospital.
Okay, that's your amended motion. And
That's my amended motion.
And this is your amended support for that motion? Okay, Pam, would you please read back the motion?
By Councilor Bearable, supported by Councilor Friedlieb to authorize administrative team and the legal teams of Essentia and the City of Virginia to develop an agreement with Essentia Health and present to the council with a proposal for Essentia to purchase the hospital with a mutually agreeable.
Is that your motion?
That will do, but we want to include what we said, the cost factor in there when they put that together, so everybody, the public is on the pages, you know, what costs have been put in. But that doesn't have to be part of the motion. That can come up in the final.
That would come up
version.
in the body of the document.
That's correct.
Thank you. And, okay, so it was been moved and supported. That's your understanding of the support for that motion, Councilor Friedlieb?
Yes.
So it's been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion carries. Thank you. Okay, I guess let's get to work and get this done as quickly as we can. We have all the information that we need. We don't need to discuss this anymore with other meetings. Let's get the two parties together. Let's come up with a decision, and let's get it on the council agenda for a vote. Thank you, everybody, for participating in this. Gentleman, Tam from Essentia Health, thank you very kindly for coming up, and for the city council for all the hard work on this negotiation process. So thank you. Thank you, Frank. Okay, next item on the agenda.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the request to donate property located at 821 13th Street North to the city. And actually, Chris Marfiotti, sorry, Chris, has some information, so I'm glad she came into the meeting about this. This is a property that we've dealt with in the past. We were working with her to get it demolished and it ended up getting contract for deed or something like that. And now she's back on her taxes. She's on the delinquent tax roll again. And she wants to donate this to the fire department for them to take it down.
And then, thank you. And I think a little back history, if I may, Chris.
So she had
is
2 properties.
right, and one was remodeled for Habitat for Humanity, right? Is that the one? That was demolished?
So she had
Okay.
2 properties side by side,
Right.
and the first one that she requested that we take down because it was in such bad repair, she had requested to keep the land and the garage that sat on it.
Oh, that's right. Mhm.
Then during that time, she had sold the neighboring property on a contract for deed to a couple who stated that they would be putting money into it to fix it up. She got it back off a contract for deed again, and it's even in worse shape. So she had approached the fire department asking if they would take it for fire burn, which we discussed with her further. And she is willing, she wants to just sign the entire thing over. We can demolish it, we can use it for fire burn. But with her age and her financial resources, there's no way that she's going to be able to rehab it.
Okay, so what is your recommendation?
I would recommend that we put this on the demolition list and assess with her right now, if there's past due taxes on it, do we want to put it in her name, or do we just want to help with assisting?
Okay, thank you. I guess I'll give you my personal opinion. This is my viewpoint only. I would say that, thank you for the offer. It is a dilapidated building. The city is committed to doing whatever we can to demolish and refurbish communities throughout the area. But this is becoming a habit, and I think there's some information that was sent to all our city councilors about the fact that a lot of these people who can't afford them, or their homeowners bad, they want to turn it over to the city and wash their hands of it. I suggest, I know it'll take some time, it should go through the tax forfeited process before anything else is done. That's my personal perspective. So moving forward, Councilor Bearable.
That was what I was going to recommend to Mayor, so.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Johnson.
I would reiterate again that we don't have a policy for accepting buildings, real property, and until we have that, I will not consider accepting this property at all.
Very good. Thank you. Okay, Councilor Freely. Okay. Okay, so then I'm looking for a motion.
Mayor, I will make a motion that we deny this request as a donation and allow it to go through the normal legal processes until it ends up in tax forfeiture.
And supported by Councilor Freely. Any further discussion? Councilor Barnzelli?
Mayor, this happened, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago. You and I went up there,
Yep.
and it was we let them
It was in bad
pay
shape.
their taxes. So what are we going to do with it, Councilor Baraboo, if we don't knock it down?
We're going to allow it to go tax forfeited,
Oh, then we can do that.
and then we'll let that process run its course. Thank you. Okay, any further discussion on that matter? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is the review the letter of understanding regarding the airport secretary bookkeeper. This was referred from our last committee, our last council meeting, actually in December, on the December 20th.
Well, I'm comfortable with the letter of understanding. Is everybody else comfortable with the letter of
Did put
understanding?
more information in your packet this time, as requested.
As requested, thank you. Councilor Bearable?
I'll also move that we authorize the letter of understanding for the position at the Elwood Airport Secretary Bookkeeper.
Thank you.
I
Councilor-
don't think there's a name, but we don't, her name is in there. We'll have to leave it in there at this point.
Thank you. Been moved by Councilor Bearable to move forward and support the letter of understanding regarding the airport security secretary bookkeeper. Is there support?
I'll support that.
Support by Councilor Barnzelli. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye, opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the drug and alcohol testing policy for non-DOT employees. I am bringing this back because both the police and fire unions have agreed to this policy, so I need to have the council formally adopt it for those two unions.
I can say that, obviously, that was my former profession down in the metro area. Drug testing was mandatory for police and fire personnel and was based on cause. It stood the test of the court system. We adopted that policy, and it was, as the president of the union at that time, we accepted that policy, and it was managed appropriately and with due care and diligence with respect to the employees based on cause. So I read through the drug testing policy. It's pretty standard, and I would support that. So any other counselor have a question, comment, or a motion to be set forth?
Mayor,
Yes, Counselor
since nobody
Bearable.
else wants
Sure,
to
sure.
be put on the spot, I've gone through the policy and read it line for line, and I agree with the policy. I'll make the motion to accept that policy.
A motion to accept that policy for those two bargaining units, supported by?
I'll support.
Supported by Counselor Paulson. Further discussion? Did you have any comments you'd like to make with respect to that? Okay, any further discussion on this matter? Okay, Counselor Paulson.
Mayor, I just have one question on the reasonable suspicion form. Would that be administered by the direct supervisor, or is it anyone that recognizes any suspicious behavior, like employee to employee?
I think it's isn't it reported to the supervisor? The supervisor reports it to the city administrator, and then a decision is made on what action needs to be taken.
So that actual reasonable suspicion form would come from our city administrator
Or the supervisor.
or the supervisor? Okay.
So what next step is then after we adopt this policy that all of our supervisors, including lieutenants and battalion chiefs, all have to go through reasonable suspicion training, say that 3 times fast.
Okay, that was my next
Yeah,
question.
and so then they'll
they
go
will
through the
be trained
training,
in.
yep.
Okay,
And so
thank
they'll
you.
all be able to identify.
Okay, thanks.
And an example would be if a police officer, as an example, was in a car accident and there was injuries involved, there was to be a drug testing automatic, as reasonable suspicion, just to ensure that, everything was proper, and that was all accepted. That's part of the reasonable suspicion part, not probable cause, just suspicion on the part. We smell alcohol in the breath, things of that nature. So,
Just a point of clarification, OSHA requires if there's hospitalization or a tow away of a vehicle, we have to test.
yes.
So that is reasonable suspicion enough that we have to do it, whether you're DOT or not. So that's everybody.
Thank you.
Mayor, just a point
Moved
of,
and supported. Further discussion, Counselor Bearable.
just a point of discussion. This would actually, Britt, end up in the HR persons for confidentiality reasons, correct? Okay.
Okay, thank you, Counselor Bearable. Moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye, opposed, motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you. Jumping down to item number 6, because we've already done number 5, is the Evelyn, Virginia Airport, and again, thankfully Chris is here. The review the statutory changes for the airport zoning. As you've seen in the email that we got from, was it Cipolla, Chris, or was it Jackie? At Cipolla, the chairperson of the airport, we need to, because of the state's airport zoning laws, we need to have a zoning board put together.
And that's required by FAA regulations, is that correct?
State statute is effective August 1st, 2019.
Right.
Yeah.
So we need to appoint some board members then, or are we just approving the board resolution to have board?
Question is, do we want to appoint just the airport authority, or do we want members from the council? Do you want members from the public? How would you like to proceed for Virginia's representation?
Well, we already have a representative, a liaison to the Virginia Airport Authority, right?
We do?
So, I mean, I don't know, maybe that individual can also serve as a conduit or as an information individual, or providing that from the city or giving us a report, et cetera. But I'll defer to the council for that. Counselor Johnson.
I would say we ask for volunteers. with the state of the board of the airport authority at this time, I don't know that I'm comfortable with one of them being a regulatory or the zoning. That just doesn't make sense. I think we should open it up for general volunteers, and then if we need to, back down to being specific to that organization if we need to, because there may be some other folks that might be interested.
Very good point, Counselor Johnson, is there may be residents that are adjacent to the airport that might be interested because it would impact them greatly if the zoning ordinance changed.
And I think that's a very good point. When the FAA regulations took effect, they were going to extend the runway system. There were residents in the surrounding area that were adversely affected by that, by the cutting down of their trees, intruding, that's probably not the proper word, on their private land when they're trying to clear, so they got a clear pathway, during the approach as required by the FAA regulations. So, this board of, that we ask for volunteers or whoever's going to be put on that board, there would be that zoning, the decision made on zoning would also have to be reported to the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA regulations. So, because if you put some zoning together and it affects the way the airport operates, the FAA has control for the most part over the airport and how that airport operates in their zoning, particularly with respect to landing and takeoff, runway extensions, approach of the landings, things. So any zoning decisions that are made would affect or would trigger a conversation or a meeting with the FAA to determine if those regulations are acceptable at the federal level. Is that correct, Britt?
Yes, yes.
Okay, very good, thank you. Councilor Paulson?
Mayor, is this something that possibly one of our planning and zoning commissioners would, since they work with zoning, and possibly one maybe on Eveleth's planning and zoning? Would that be prudent, or would that be just too many people?
I think maybe we do a call for volunteers, and I'll reach out specifically to the Planning and Zoning Commission and see if any of them are interested in being part of this too. That's a great idea.
Yeah, so did you want to make that a form of a motion?
I'd like to make that as a form of a motion,
Okay,
Mr. Mayor.
and thank you very much, Councilor Paulson. And the motion would be?
To
Call for volunteers.
call for volunteers, including Planning and Zoning Commission.
Thank you. Is there support for that?
I'll support for further discussion.
Yeah, support. Motion by Councilor Paulson, supported by Councilor Bearable. Further discussion. Councilor Bearable.
I just assume that this board needs to consist of 2 and 2, 2 from Virginia, 2 from Eveleth, correct? So it's 4 total. So- No, it doesn't have to be the county, it could be either or from my reading of this.
From the county wide. It doesn't have to be Virginia or Eveleth resident, it could be anybody.
That's not the way I
Oh,
read it.
you mean county staff?
It's county or municipality, so,
So we'll call the county and see if they have somebody that wants to.
okay, all
Participate.
right, that's fine.
Okay, thank you. So for
Positive.
clarification purposes, first, we're reviewing the statutory changes to airport zoning. That does not require a motion. We're just reviewing it. Or do you want a motion to accept?
Nope, Julianne's got we have to vote on that motion first, the calling for
so-
volunteers.
Okay, so that's what we're voting on, that one.
That's what we're voting on that one.
Thank
Yep.
you. Okay, a motion on 6A. Is there, it's been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye, opposed, motion carries. Thank you. Now 6B.
And 6B is if we have an email that we received from Jackie from the city of Eveleth regarding that she wants to discuss potential changes to the airport authority ordinance. And she's asking for the city council to appoint 2 city council members to the subcommittee to meet with 2 city councilors from Eveleth to talk about the airport ordinance.
Yeah, I know this is like a Category 5 or even a Category 6 airport. In my experience working at the Metropolitan Airports Commission, which is was a Category 1 airport at that time. I think it's now Category X, which is the highest rating that you can have. There's some issues about, what they can do on the airport as far as enforcing ordinances, but the majority of the enforcement mechanisms that affect aircraft are are regulated by the FAA. So these ordinances that we're looking at, what would that entail? What would that entail as far as the ordinance goes?
We have a city ordinance about the airport, that the joint powers
That
authority.
would be that
That's
portion of it?
that portion of it,
Okay,
yep.
so it would be reviewing the local,
Doing our city ordinance, which mirrors Evelyn's city ordinance, so they're both the same.
and she wants to make some changes.
She wants to make some changes.
And so we should have somebody at the table to
Two council
help
members.
discuss those proposed changes she'd like to make. So we'd like to appoint a couple of councilors to that. So I don't know if we should, maybe we could let you know within the next week or so, instead of doing it right now, so people can look at their schedules, unless you want to appoint. I think Councilor Johnson has his light on. Councilor Johnson.
I would volunteer to sit on that subcommittee.
Okay, well, there you have it. Councilor Johnson is one committee member to sit on that council. Do we have another volunteer on the council to do that? Okay, thank you. Councilor Freely. So we have two city council volunteers to serve on the subcommittee for the Airport Authority regarding the ordinance review. That would be Councilor Johnson and Councilor Freely. So I would like their names proffered for appointment. We'll need a motion.
I'll support.
Moved by Councilor Baraboo, supported by Councilor Paulson, to appoint Councilor Freely and Councilor Johnson to sit as the two appointed subcommittee members to the Airport Authority Ordinance Review for the City of Virginia. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
And item number 7 is approve the memorandum of understanding with the Virginia Police Department and Mesabi Range College for coordination of services for starting December 31st, 2019 through December 31st, 2021.
We'll move the memorandum of understanding.
Moved by Councilor Johnson. Is there support? A support by Councilor Freely. Is there any further discussion? Councilor Johnson.
This is one of the things that I think kind of fits into this is Deputy Chief Nicola comes to the college in August and speaks with the we have what's called boot camp, and he comes and speaks to some of the student athletes, and this gets talked about a little bit too, about the city's responsibility and that. So I work on campus, and I think that's a good partnership, and like to see it be more successful in the future.
Yeah, thank you, Councilor Johnson. It's been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Item number 8, because we received a request for the use of city-owned golf carts for EarthFest 2020 on April 25th, 2020 in Mountain Iron. We have done this in the past, and Marlise is asking for 3 4-seater golf carts. We unfortunately only have 2 4-seater golf carts, but we are available that weekend to get them to her if it's okay with the council.
Well, if it's approved, I have a 4-seater golf cart. They can use that, so they'll have 3. Okay, very good. So what is the council's pleasure? Councilor Johnson?
I will move the borrowing of the golf carts.
Very good. Is there support?
I'll support for discussion.
Yeah, support by Councilor Paulson. Further discussion, Councilor Paulson?
I just have a question regarding the insurance. Does she carry the insurance on that?
Yeah, we
Through what organization? Through her?
Iron Range Partnership for Sustainability that runs EarthFest.
Okay, so that's in alignment with what we have done.
Yes, yep. They've been a very good organization to work with on those kind of matters.
Okay, thank you. It's been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
And I do have an additional item I did place on your desk as I sent an email yesterday. I got a phone call from Nancy on Friday saying something's wrong with the roof, the ceiling and the elevator. We sent Kurt over and the motor was leaking something into the elevator ceiling. The elevator company came yesterday and said, your motor is shot. It's going to go any minute now. Could be tomorrow, could be 3 months from now, but not much longer than 3 months. They said the vintage of it is 1980 something, so it's, quite old now. And this is the proposal they sent for the repair of the motor.
Beats building a new one.
That is true.
Beats building a new elevator.
And we do have it serviced every year, so this was just completely unexpected, and thankfully somebody mentioned it to Nancy that something's wrong in the ceiling in the elevator, and she caught it rather quickly.
So the cost will be incurred by where?
It'll have to come out of the library's fund.
And so we'll have to make some adjustments there and
To make
take a
some
look at that?
adjustments to spending. However, this is
Okay.
what
So
happens
we'll
when you
have
have an
a-
emergency repair.
So, of course, the burden is on you and our finance director to
Correct, to
figure
figure
that
out,
out.
yeah.
Okay, very
Also
good.
move, Mayor, that we replace that motor in the elevator and library. In the meantime, we put it out of operation in case something happens and that elevator creates a hazard.
A move by Counselor Bearable to approve the quote to repair the elevator at the library, and from this day forward, shut down the elevator system cannot be used until the repair is done. Support by?
I'll support, but for further discussion.
Yeah, support by Counselor Friedlieb. Counselor Friedlieb, further discussion.
No offense to MEI, but I mean, it seems kind of a generic estimate. Like, go to like Iron Trail, and they'll tell you 1.5 hours for this, 2.5 hours to do that, 1.6, whatever. And $27,000 to change out a motor. I guess I would want to know how much is the cost of the new motor, how much is the cost of the parts. I mean, it just seems to me like for that, I mean, he could be done in a day for all I know. I don't know, you know, I would like to know specifically what this all entails in terms of the cost for the parts and the estimated labor that he'll invest in time to do that, because I don't know, somebody with his truck and tools could come and pull it apart, put it back together, and walk out with $27,000 a day later. I don't know, you know, so I'm a little skeptical of the generic nature of this quote. I'd like to have some more specificity in terms of like the approximate time it's gonna take and the approximate parts that it'll be needed to come up with that total. But that's not to hold back on the project if we're all in favor. I think we have to start looking at that.
I can definitely get something for the council meeting. I'll have to ask for some more information and
That might help.
clarification.
I mean, just to give me a little
Yep.
better mindset in terms of like what we're getting.
With that being said, Mayor, I'll rescind my motion at this point in time until the council meeting, and if Britt can get us more information, that's probably a better, Counselor Freelip is correct. Even though they got the scope of work, we should have some cost estimate.
Okay, their motion to approve the expense has been rescinded in the second as well, obviously. So there's nothing else on the table here. So my question would be, MEI has been the service provider for this elevator system. It's an MEI elevator. So in order to ensure the warranty of the MEI elevator has to be serviced by the MEI elevator, so this is the only quote for the most part, unless you put a new elevator system by Otis or something else. So the question that Councilor Friede was asking, I think we all want to know is, where's that $27,000 breakdown? How much is the pump, et cetera? So yeah, okay. So we'll be ready for that for the council meeting? All right, thank you very much, Britt. Okay, anybody else have anything they'd like to bring before we close? Councilor Bonzelli.
Thank you, Mayor. So you blow the engine on your Cadillac, drive it down to Washkies, are they gonna charge $27,000? I don't think so. You could buy two motors and put it in for that. But I agree with you, Mayor. The Washington Manor, remember when she came to us and the elevator is weak? Those elevator people are certified for the safety, aren't they?
You're
That's why they have to do
licensed
all
and
that.
nationally certified, yeah.
There's a state inspection they have to have done, so there's quite a bit to it.
So in the meantime, then, we're going to have a signage up not usable.
I got to shut it down immediately, right?
Okay, good.
You don't need a motion for that. Okay, good, thank you. Councilor Johnson?
My other question to them would be how long, what's the timeout on looking
I'll find out.
for the, So just wanted to make sure I clarified that.
Well, obviously, it's going to be more than a week because we're not going to be able to make the decision about approving the expense to repair until for the 14th. So it's going to be a while, right? Thank you. Okay, any further discussion? Counselor Freely?
I'm just not good at this button today.
Well, we're good. Okay, move to support. Any further discussion? Counselor Paulson?
I just wanted to ask, is there any alternative to help persons with disabilities? No wheelchair, no
No ramps.
ramps? That could be.
Look at that. Scott's on the repair crew. We can take a look and see what we can do in the interim,
Maybe a temporary option?
ramp in there or something.
That would be great if at all possible.
Thank you, Counselor Paulson.
Great idea.
Okay, any other conversation or questions or comments or concerns? Okay, it's been moved.
I do have one other thing. We did get that email yesterday from a local daycare.
Yeah, we're gonna vote.
Sorry.
Yeah, and then we'll do the daycare deal.
Yep, thank you.
Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye, opposed, motion carries. Okay, the
The
Pine
local
Mill Court
Yes,
Daycare
local
Center.
daycare that's located near Pine Mill Court. Does the city want to entertain an option to purchase the daycare?
Counselor Johnson.
Mayor is a former employee, not of there, well, I used to work there back then. Professionally, I don't think the city should be in the daycare business. It would be good if we could maybe help, but I can tell you that the facility itself is not necessarily the most conducive to a secure child care center. So I think we should say, again, since we don't have a policy again, but also thanks, but no thanks. And if we need to do letters of support or something in the future for potential buyers, I think that would be something we can do, but I don't think the city is in any place to take on being the landlord or any other childcare focused stuff.
Well, you know, we have to be consistent. This is just like the B'nai Abraham deal. We're not going to help them out in that regard. We voted not to do that. Why we would do in this case too, I don't get that either. So, thank you. Do we need a motion on that? Okay, let's have a motion. Counselor Johnson, would you like to make a motion?
I will move that we decline purchasing the daycare, but offer support as we can in the future for facilitation, in the letter of support or similar manner.
Thank you. Is there support? Support by Counselor Beyondich. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye, opposed, motion carries. That's it? Anybody else have anything they'd like to bring up before the committee of the whole before we adjourn? Counselor Johnson?
Thank you, Mayor. We got the MEC design development, and I wanted to point out something that is a huge problem for me. On page 5 in the middle, first dot in blue, the design team, architectural, civil, mechanical, plumbing, civil, meets every 2 weeks, typically Thursdays. The next meeting is January 9th, 1 p.m. in Duluth. That is a huge problem for me. This is a City of Virginia project. I do not think they should be meeting in Duluth, or there should be options where it's centered in Duluth and they call in. This is one of those things where, again, that's not time to talk about it. It's not time to talk about it. Oops, you missed the deadline to talk about it. So I, as the person receiving the services, have a huge problem that these design meetings are being held in Duluth and not in Virginia. And I don't know if there's something we can do about it. Pardon me?
The architect? and
Would
mention
you
that to him?
please
Yes,
let them know that, that we're paying them to be here,
yes.
so they should be here.
And we do have a meeting on January 14th at 4 o'clock with the architect. The council is all invited.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Counselor Johnson. Anybody else before we adjourn? Counselor Paulson?
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I have a question. Do we do a reorganizational meeting then in,
Not until the election year,
not until the election year?
so end of this year.
Would it be possible, Pam, to get the printout of what, yeah, if you don't, do you mind? Okay, thank you.
I have it here somewhere, but, okay, thank you. All right, very good. Thank you. Okay, anybody else? Welcome aboard, Brian, for your first committee of the whole meeting. Thanks for coming, and lots of information to garner, so All right, nothing else before coming to the committee of the whole meeting. We will adjourn to our next council meeting, which is Tuesday, January 14th at 5 o'clock. Is that correct? We have a public hearing at 5 o'clock. Okay, thank you, everybody, for all your hard work. We stand adjourned.